Okay, today we're going to look at the Guardian Juggernaut Focus Rage build in 7.3.1. There's a little bit of updates that we can implement that is going to improve our playstyle with this. So let's go ahead and have a look. The main rotation abilities that we're going to be using on the Guardian Focus side is Combat Focus, Force Exhaustion, Focus Burst, Concentrated Slice, Repose, Sundering Strike, Blade Storm, Zealous Leap, and Dispatch. On the Juggernaut side, it's Enrage, Force Crush, Raging Burst, Furious Strike, Retaliation, Sundering Assault, Force Scream, Obliterate, Vicious Throw for the same abilities. Our main rotation goes as follows. This is not the opener. We're going to talk about the opener, but the main rotation starts with Combat Focus, 3 Concentrated Slices, Zealous Leap, Sundering Strike, Focused Burst, Concentrated Slice, Dispatch if it's available. If it's not available, you're going to go to Repose, and then Zealous Leap, Blade Storm, Forced Exhaustion, Focused Burst. If we look at it very carefully, we can see that we have 4 Concentrated Slices in this rotation. We have 2 Focused Bursts, so we're buffing our next Concentrated Slice that way twice. We do have 2 Zealous Leaps as well, so this rotation is quite heavy on the leap. If you're in any fight where you need to not move so much, or there's problems with movement related complications, this rotation would not be the best suited for you. Look at the Vigilance, Vengeance, DPS. It's a much better situation for those kinds of problems. But the nice thing with this rotation as a single target DPS rotation, it is really up there with its performance. We do want to take note with these 4 abilities. Our Combat Focus with the selection that we're going to do is going to give us a 6-second boost where no ability goes on cooldown. So these 4 abilities will not go on cooldown. If we do push it in timing, we won't be able to get this Concentrated Slice or this Zealous Leap off, because they will be going on cooldown. So you're going to look at the 4 abilities being 1.4 seconds global cooldown. You won't be able to push another one. So we want to keep this in mind. If we don't get the timing right to get 3 Concentrated Slice in, maybe switch that up for 2, and then a Zealous Leap. And we can cover this a little bit more in the video itself. Next, Juggernaut Rage is going to be Enrage, Furious Strike 3 times, Obliterate, Sundering Assault, Raging Burst, Furious Strike, Vicious Throw, Obliterate, Force Scream, Force Crush, Raging Burst. What I found really handy is to set up my toolbar as such. 1 Combat Focus, 1 Concentrated Slice, a Zealous Leap, Sundering Strike, Focus Burst, Concentrated Slice, Dispatch, and Repose next to each other. I know that that's going to be in the 7 and 8 position in the slot. Then Zealous Leap, Blade Storm, Force Exhaustion. This will take up 12 slots if you have this 1 Concentrated Slice only once, and you just know you have to punch it 3 times. Very visual representation. It's really great for switching targets. It doesn't care about having buffs on the target, even though that makes a difference, but you'll apply them as you go through your rotation. When you leap into your attack, your opener is going to be Force, Exhaustion, Focus Burst, and then start your rotation. So that's a really easy starting rotation. You just do the last 2 abilities after you leap in, and then start your rotation. Our ability tree looks as such. We have line 68 as the equal option there. If movement is more important, then you want to take your Mad Dash. Otherwise, do your Reflect. In line 39, the best solution there is the middle one here. The other ones do play some really unique roles, and we can talk about it in the video. It has some very fancy features that you might want to consider in certain fights. And then the very important one is 43. Very key to select this option here. 51 has some interesting features. I mostly prefer this so that I can get that extra dispatch off. Okay. And then now tactical is going to be Cauterized Connery. If you struggle to find this, It is a Sentinel tactical that works for the Guardian. So if you go to the vendor and you can't find this tactical, select all at the top, so you can see all of the tacticals and you can find it. And then we're going to use the Champion's Precision package and the Fearless Victor package as our implants. Okay, let's go into the game and see what it looks like in there. At the bottom here, this is my stats package from the Star Parser. On the right side, you can see the abilities that I'm activating. They go from the top down, so they'll feed in from the top straight down so you can see what I'm activating. As you can see, my tray starts with Combat Focus, Concentrated Slice, Zealous Leap, Sundering Strike, Focused Burst, Concentrated Slice, and here's that Dispatch that takes priority over Repose. If I have a Dispatch, I do that and skip Repose. If I don't have a Dispatch, I skip Dispatch and do Repose, and then keep going. Zealous Leap, Blade Storm, Forced Exhaustion, Focused Burst. Okay, the next thing that we should look at a little bit here is, let's look at the ability tree real quick. Let's look at this line 68. Of course, the Saber Reflect is a great reflect. Keep in mind it is for ranged force and tech attacks, so it depends on the attack ability that is being activated against you. Sometimes this reflect is not worth it, and then your benefit is to do something like Blade Blitz or Mad Dash. The thing that is really nice here is your defense chance goes up to 100%. That in several fights can avoid all incoming damage. So if you time it right, during that graphic display, you will actually have immunity to most damages that are in the game. So you can use it to avoid certain damage. So the reflect is really nice since we do have a gap closer that is on a really short cooldown. So that is really nice. Okay, so that's line 68. Just wanted to point that out. Let's look a little bit at line 39. Zealous Defense is activating Zealous Leap, puts a mini ward on yourself, absorbing 15k damage, lasts up to 10 seconds. Keep in mind that we have that Zealous Leap twice in our rotation. So twice in our rotation, we have a defensive that goes up that combined is absorbing about 30,000 damage in a rotation. This is a really, really nice feature because if we look at the alternatives, activating Zealous Leaps reduces the cooldown of Combat Focus. You'll notice we do not have this problem. Combat Focus is going to come off cooldown in this rotation just fine, so we don't need this. There is an exception here. If we are in a fight where we are in a really tight window to do burst damage, you'll notice that we really are front loaded with a big burst damage in our rotation. The rest of our rotation has a significant amount of damage, but really everything is punched into this forward part, and I'll demonstrate as such. So take note when we come to this 1, 2, 3, all 50,000 damage, right? So those 3 concentrated slices with the Zealous Leap, really, really big hits. So if we're in a fight where we have little windows to punch in, we might want to be ready to leap in and get our Combat Focus off of cooldown. So let me just quickly go through the rotation without this benefit. Let's just look. I'm going to just take it easy. 1, 2, 3, 4. Look at the Combat Focus coming off cooldown. So there it's off cooldown on this ability here. Our Blade Storm at the end, it came off of cooldown. Let's just look at it with this other option in the play. So if we go for this Zealous Discovery, we can now repeat it and see if it comes off a little bit earlier than Blade Storm. There it came off cooldown. Okay, so it came off of cooldown a little bit earlier. And that's my point about it. It's a minor benefit, but if you are in a tight window where you need to get get your rotation back to the start much sooner, this is something that you might want to consider. I can think about the last boss in Eternity Vault, where you have those little tight windows where you might want to be ready. That could be in one situation where you really don't need the defense. If it doesn't do much for you, you might want to pick this. Zealous Annihilation, killing an enemy within 3 seconds of dealing damage with Zealous Leap. Keep in mind our Zealous Leap is twice in the rotation, so that really can play into it. Damage with Zealous Leap resets the cooldown of Zealous Leap, Force Sweep, and Focused Burst. Increases their damage by 25% for 6 seconds. This effect can only occur every 6 seconds. So, with the timing of our rotation, we are at about... we potentially could take benefit from this. I'm thinking of a situation where we are dealing with a group of mobs, where this could be a benefit, where you could be just doing a normal rotation, and as you're killing enemies, you have a probability of having this effect. So maybe that could be nice, but really the Zealous Defense and mobs could be even nicer. Okay. Let's go through the other abilities real quick. Zenith, level 23. Dealing damage with Focused Burst or Force Sweep increases your critical hit chance and critical hit damage by 15% for 6 seconds. This effect cannot occur more than once every 8 seconds. Keep in mind that our Focused Burst is what we're going to end with here. That's why we have that opening rotation, starting when we Force Exhaustion, Focused Burst. That's going to buff our concentrated slices. So that's where that mechanic is. That's why it's at the end of our rotation. Blade Burst at line 27. Blade Storm does damage to additional enemies in a cone in front of you and slows them by 50% for 6 seconds. There really isn't... we don't want to change our rotation with something like Cyclone Slash. I'll talk about AoE damage. Blade Barrage mobilizes the target for 3 seconds and generates 1 focus. Not a great real benefit for it. We get the most out of Blade Burst. Line 43, Focused Meditation. This is pretty much key to our rotation. Each time you deal damage with a focus-based kinetic or energy attack, you generate 1 focus. Great. Focus spending attacks have no cooldown during combat focus. That's how we can get so many concentrated slice. When we have combat focus, which lasts for 6 seconds, increases our how many times we can do these concentrated slices. Okay, let's look at line 51. Battlefield Command. Getting attacked reduces the active cooldown of Force Leap by 1 second. This effect cannot occur more than once every 1.5 seconds. This is nice. Our Force Leap is already on a 13-second cooldown, so we really don't need this benefit. We generally leap in and that's it. I would not recommend during your fight to run back and try and leap in multiple times. That is just to get the dispatch. You would rather want to just go through your rotation. There's more benefits in the DPS in the back end to keep fighting. If you have to switch enemies, that is a nice feature. If you want a gap closer, what it does mean is that you have a gap closer almost all the time. The second part of this is really where the benefit is. Force Leap enables your next dispatch or Willing Blade to be used against the target with any percentage of health. So that's what when your opener gets the dispatch available. Keep in mind your rotation is pretty tight to get to this dispatch on the opener. If you delay in any which way, you're not going to get it. Don't worry about it. Dispatch becomes available on targets once they get below 30% health. And that's really when the DPS also, you'll notice you're going to really start picking up some DPS. Line 64. All area effect damage is reduced by 60% for 15 seconds after challenging call. So this is your AoE damage reduction as challenging call. It's also a threat reducer. Use this whenever you see AoE damage. It's a really effective one, and it's on a 45-second cooldown. I can think of several fights where that is a great benefit. We talked about line 68. Let's look at 73. Whenever your movement is impaired, you gain a 10% damage bonus to your next ability that consumes focus. This effect can stack up to 5 times and last 15 seconds. It is nice. There really isn't another one in this set that really benefits that much. Your defense discipline, we are for focus of force. Sweep and vigilant thrust sunders the targets. They damage for 45 seconds. Sundered targets have their armor rating reduced. You are not really an AoE damage ability dealer with the focused. We're going to talk about doing AoE damage. And in that case, you might want to select that. You already have sundering effects in here. If we go ahead and leap in there, there's our sundering attack. So it comes in on sundering strike. So we do not really have to worry about it. It is in our rotation. We do not want to specifically force to open with it. It does have a benefit at reducing the target's armor. We're going to put it in our rotation, and we're going to refresh it with our rotation as we keep going on. The other one is reduces the cooldown of focus defense by 30 seconds. If you really are relying on focus defense a lot, that is something to consider. That could be very helpful for solo play. But if you're in a group, you really shouldn't need focus defense that much. Okay, let's have a look at the other abilities here. Situ Mastery, this just sets up your Guardian, increases armor penetration and critical hit damage by 15% for force attacks and damage dealt. So when we look at our crit chance, I'm currently at 35%. If you look at this ability, it adds 15% to all of your force attacks. So there's already a nice benefit there. The crit base is actually much higher for force attack. Reduces the momentum, reduces the cooldown of Zealous Leap by 3 seconds and causes Forced Leap and Zealous Leap to make your next Blade Storm deal 5% more damage and generate 1 focus rather than consume focus. So there's some benefits there. Really nice feature there. Heightened Power increases all damage dealt by 5% for 6 seconds after dealing damage as Force Sweep or Focused Burst. Keep in mind, Focused Burst is in our open rotationer, so that's where some of that damage comes from. Felling Blow, Force Leap and Zealous Leap makes your next Force Sweep and Focus Burst used within 20 seconds an automatic critical hit. We have Zealous Leap twice in our rotation, so there's a nice benefit right there. Zephyrin Slash, Strike, Sundering Strike, Slash, Cyclone Slash, Repose, Blade Storm, Dispatch, and Concentrated Slide reduces the active cooldown of Force Sweep, Focused Burst, and Zealous Leap by 1 second, and Combat Focus by 2 seconds. So this is where in our rotation we're getting this Combat Focus that used to be at 26 seconds down back into our rotation. Right around Blade Storm we just keep going, and then we can get back into our rotation. Some other benefits, of course, with Focused Burst, and then Singularity, Combat Focus and Forced Exhaustion grant Singularity, increasing the damage dealt of your next Force Sweep or Focused Burst by 15%, making your next Force Sweep or Focused Burst consume no focus. Additionally, the cooldown of Combat Focus is reduced by 15 seconds, and Combat Focus generates 6 additional focus over 6 seconds when used. That is really important. So if you look at it, we generate 6 focus when we start Combat Focus, but watch how it just keeps building over 6 seconds. This is the mechanics that allows us Concentrated Slice 3 times. If we combine that with our Force Leap, we're at full, and that's what gives us those Concentrated Slice. Also, the first Concentrated Slice after Combat Focus doesn't consume Force, and we'll get to how that works. Then Force Lash, concentrated slice and table, repose, and beats down its target for 45 seconds. Beat down targets take 5% more damage from melee attacks. Slash, Cyclone Slash, and repose deals additional damage, force energy damage. Focused Vision. Forced Exhaustion grants focused vision, making your next Zealous Leap or concentrated slice consume no focus. So that is Forced Exhaustion grants focused vision. This forced exhaustion is key to be preceding the first concentrated slice because of this mechanics. That's why we open up forced exhaustion. That makes our concentrated slice use no end focus. You see that? So that's the key with our opener. That's why we also want to start. If any time we have an interruption in our rotation, we always want to have a forced exhaustion and then start our rotation just to make sure we can get that 3 concentrated slices off. So this forced exhaustion is really important for our setup. Okay. Next is activating Focus Burst or Force Sweep. Increases your damage reduction by 10% for 6 seconds. This cannot occur more than once every 8 seconds. Activating Focused Burst. So we have a Focused Burst over here. We have a Focused Burst over here. Reduces our damage reduction increases our damage reduction by 10% for 6 seconds. So the timing here is perfect. It's really in the middle of our rotation. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That is 1.4 seconds. So they perfectly timed to give us that benefit. And keep in mind that we also have Zealous Leap right 1, and then we have our Zealous Leap here again 2. So we're really tanky with this setup. By just being in our rotation, we have a shield of 15k, we have a base damage reduction of 10% every 8 seconds for 6 seconds. This is a really tanky operation here. We can really be very effective at reducing the amount of damage just without rotation. So keep in mind, your rotation is your damage reduction. It is built in there. It's what keeps you alive. Let's look at our Saber Ward. Raises a lightsaber ward, increasing your melee and ranged defense by 50% and absorbing 25% of the damage taken from force and tech attacks. Last 12 seconds. We'll get to the gear in a second and just see how that is, but that is a really powerful Saber Ward. Just keep in mind, it lasts 12 seconds. Inure temporarily increases your maximum health by 30% for 10 seconds and removes all cleansable effects. When the effect ends, the health is lost. This is a really unique one. We're going to talk about planning your defensive around focus defense and Inure. Inure is a cleanse, a great cleanse. So if you are in fights where you need to cleanse, you have a cleanse every 1 minute, and that's quite helpful in certain situations. If you're using this as a defensive when you're taking damage, what is a good strategy, instead of using just focus defense by itself, if you use a Inure and then focus defense, activate your focus defense, then use a Inure. What will happen is you'll have a bigger hit points to fill up for, and at the end of 10 seconds you'll lose that hit points, but it's great to have that buffer, but you'll need something to help you fill up those hit points after the fact, because you lose those hit points. And focus defense can really play a good role on that. So focus defense is of course a big heal. You get 12 charges every time you get hit. Those charges tick off and they can crit 40 or 50k at a time. I've seen it happen quite a few times where you just see 50 tick off at the top of your head. Let's look at gear a little bit. I'm of course at the higher item rating at this point, so let's just talk about the basics behind it. Of course, you want to get your accuracy to 10%. You see mine is here at 9. The reason why it's at 9 is if we look at our character perks. Imperial or Republic classes, if you look here, I've got an accuracy boost here. If you look at the top of one of your characters, grants a bonus to your accuracy. That is 1%. It doesn't list it there, but that's a really big benefit. The way that you get this is completing chapter 2 in your storyline and going to your ship and talking to your companions. So anyone with a triangle, you talk to them, and this unlocks it for all of your characters. You just have to do it on one character, and then you get that 1% bonus. And we can see that 1% bonus because when we scroll down, our accuracy is at 10.07%. So I got that by getting my accuracy number right. Alacrity, I would recommend not going below 2200. I know there's a number of around 2057. A lot of people are going back and forwards, but it's quite noticeable that sometimes that number isn't quite as well calculated in the system. So we find that we get a better alacrity effect around 2200, and then the rest into critical, whatever you have. If you are very new to the game and you just do not have as many stats, there is still an option to go with 0 alacrity while you're building it and go to crit. But my suggestion is just get your item rating up, use the hide and seek characters if you want to Google that and find out how to do that, and then just get stats. If your critical is below around 2500, it is still doable. This rotation doesn't rely on crit to be effective, meaning that there isn't some mechanic related to crit making your cooldowns work correctly. So it's a very easy rotation to start with. Let's look a little bit on AoE damage. We have Force Sweep as a AoE attack. It goes on cooldown for 10 seconds, but if we consider it, if we really have to do some light AoE, we can replace these concentrated slices and zealous leaps with Force Sweep. So if I go in, do that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and it goes on cooldown, and now I just go through my rotation. Okay. The only problem that I might face is that I might use up too much focus. In that case, we have a little situation here called Saber Throw. And I want everybody to have their Saber Throw is not in the rotation. But if you ever get into a situation where you just cannot continue with the rotation, you do your Saber Throw. Keep in mind that our Force Exhaustion and Focus Burst is really key to proceeding our Concentrated Slice if we go into that rotation. So now Combat Focus, and we can go back to our AoE 1, 2, 3. And you see our Saber Throw is back. And the only problem that we have is because Force Sweep is not one of the abilities that reduces the cooldown of Combat Focus, we could have a problem in that situation where Combat Focus is not off cooldown. In that case, we want to use some sort of filler. A good filler could be a Force Sweep, but it uses a focus. But if our Saber Throw is available, we could always use that. So it's not always that sustainable to use Force Sweep too much. We could go into a situation where we go with maybe 2 of them. 1, 2. Let's do 2 of them. So we just replace the concentrated slice, and you see it's much more sustainable. So if we really need to incorporate some AoE, we can. But this is not the class that is shining in AoE. Sometimes it's much better just to single target it. There is something to be said. If you are going to need that kind of AoE, you do want to consider Purifying Sweep. It's really going to help you sunder all of the targets while you use your Force Sweep. I do want to mention shield Adrenals as a defensive. I strongly suggest shield Adrenals. I know people will love critical Adrenals, but if you're in a fight where you potentially could take a lot of damage, or you are considered that, oh, I need to be the tank or semi-tank later in the fight, a lot of people will ask of that of you if you're a guardian. Hey, can you tank for a few seconds while some mechanic is happening? Or can you, there's a big demand for that for guardians. Instead of using up your critical Adrenal, use your shield Adrenal. You'll notice that that really makes a difference. The other thing to take note of is that if you use a focused retribution relic with a devastating vengeance, which is that critical one, like I have right here, right now, that is going to decrease the benefit of critical Adrenal. So when you do that leap in, you see here's my one going. Already the critical surge is on. If I was to use my critical Adrenal on the opener, I really wouldn't get that benefit because of the diminishing returns of stacking crit. So if you are going to use the critical Adrenal, consider using it on the second part of your second rotation. Let's look a little bit about some of the timing here. If we have a situation where I leap in, I want you to take note on this combat focused, never getting the global cooldown window. See, it never gets the screen coming across it. Okay. It's also an instant cast. So while the global cooldown is going on, I can activate combat focus. So activating combat focus shouldn't be taking up a global cooldown on your rotation. When I come in, I can already click it, and so the next slotted time ability should be Concentrated Slice. The combat focus should be activated as I'm finishing activating Focused Burst. So you really need to click it and then come immediately combat focus and get your Concentrated Slice ready. It's also the reason why at 1.4 second global cooldown we can get only 4 abilities in, but we really want to squeeze that timing in. Your actions per minute is really going to depend on, is going to be a result of how much DPS you're doing, and you do not want to delay this combat focus too much because you really want to get the next Concentrated Slice off as soon as you can. Okay, a little bit more on this timing. We want to consider that these Concentrated Slices and these Zealous Leap following the combat focus have a lot of time slots. We have to really think about these allotted time slots, because if we go too far in the allotted time slots, we could put these abilities off of cooldown, and we can see later in the rotation we have Concentrated Slice, and then we have another Zealous Leap, and these play a key role in some of the functionality. So let's look at some of our tactical first of all. Cauterized coronary. Concentrated Slice causes its target to burn. So if we have a slice here, there's that burn, and if we go through the rotation, we refresh it later in the rotation again. And so if we get this Concentrated Slice on cooldown, we won't be able to refresh it, and that's damage that we are losing because of that timing. Additionally, Zealous Leap has a defensive that we keep reapplying, Zealous Defense, twice in our rotation. So if we really want to get the benefit of that, we want to space this timing out really for those benefits. So think of it as a musical instrument that you're playing. As soon as you do combat focus, do pop, 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 Zealous Leap, and go on. If you have to skip a Concentrated Slice, it's better off because your burn effect is going to help you out. Don't try and force these. And that happens to me sometimes where I'm in a situation where I cannot be close to the target, or I'm doing some other mechanic and I already by mistake maybe activated combat focus and then might need to do some other feature came along. Go ahead and do the other mechanics, come back and just go down the rest of your rotation. Or if it just takes one global cooldown, let's say I had to do combat focus, slice, had to activate something else, and then another slice. I skip that one slice and I go straight to Zealous Leap. Let it take that global cooldown slot. in its allotted time frame, it'll help you do more DPS and it'll keep your defensives up as well. Okay, numbers wise, what can we do? I'm going to not click, as most of you know. I'm not a clicker, I'm going to use the keyboard. Let's see a rough number of what it looks like on this dummy. 1 concentrated slice, 2 concentrated slice, 3. Okay, about 31, 32. It's going to depend on how much you crit and what your build is, your item rating, how much you can keep on that actions per minute. If we have a look at that time frame, if I just go back to the actual activated damage, we're looking at about 31 actions per minute, about 46. Generally, I can get to 47, 48, but that's going to be key to your how much damage you do, is getting that actions per minute up and maintaining that tight rotation. It's a really flexible class. I love doing single target attacks on bosses. You generally get to leap forward with your zealous leaps, and it's really tanky as a solo. If you want to do some master mode flashpoints on your by yourself, there's several out there that this class with a good companion can really shine. There's some problems with the class because of the zealous leap, so be aware of that. Let's go over to the Imperial side and see what that Rage class looks like. Okay, on the Imperial Juggernaut, we're looking at the same kind of setup. Of course, now we have Enrage, 3 Furious Strikes, Obliterate, Sundering Assault, a Raging Burst, Furious Strike, a Vicious Throw whenever it's available. If it's being activated, we're going to skip Retaliation, otherwise we do Retaliation. Obliterate, Force Scream, Force Crush, Raging Burst. We open, of course, with our Leap In, Force Crush, Raging Burst. If you cannot leap in, you're going to, say you have to be close to your target to start the fight. Instead of that leap, you're going to use Saber Throw, and it accomplishes the exact same functionality. We can always do this and start our rotation. Of course, we're not going to have that Vicious Throw. Okay, let's have a look a little bit. Something to watch out for. When you open up your combat style and you see Seething Defense, log off and log on with the character and just see if this number changes. Sometimes it should automatically load when you load into a new instance, like if you go into a flashpoint, if we go into an operation, it should automatically refresh, but this number should not. There's sometimes a situation where I log on and this number is low, and then I log off and log back on, and it's just some of the features in the game lately where some of these numbers don't refresh correctly. So I just wanted to point that out. The other abilities are exactly the same. Keep in mind we want to go between Saber, Reflect, and Mad Dash, depending on what we want to do there. There is some benefits in playing around with line 39, depending on some unique fights. Warmonger is definitely a nice feature here because of that Vicious Throw being available on the opener. But we might get a benefit from extending Roar. There is some features where we might do some extra AoE up to 30 meters if that's the case. So there could be a feature in there. Let's have a look and see what this rotation looks like on the Imperial side. Nice crits there. That's definitely going to help the parsing numbers here. Okay, so we definitely had a lucky parse there. There's some big crit numbers again. I would say this is a fairly unique scenario where I'm getting 35. It's definitely not the norm. But I do want to take note of the actions per minute. That when you get your actions per minute up there, the numbers really do creep up. And that is really key to the real damage, is being really tight on your rotation. For some reason I find it always easier on the Imperial Juggernaut than I do on my Guardian. I don't know why, whether it's just the perception and animation, but I always like just the sounds and everything from the Juggernaut. That roar is just impressive. Nice crits again. I'm definitely parsing higher than I would normally do on this rotation. So, but just to show you, really great single target rotation. Has some really major flaws you have to keep in mind. This leap ability is really a problem in several fights from Obliterate. It can really get into trouble, and the reason why is, let me just demonstrate some mechanics. So I'm going to zigzag from right to left as I obliterate, and I'm going to keep doing that. And notice how I'm stuck in one place. That little pause causes more problems than you might imagine. It really can cause situations where you leap into some feature or some ability that you weren't expecting because you're just going through your rotation. So you need to be really aware that if you're supposed to be outside of something and you activate that, it might leap you right into it. So that that's something to be very aware of. A nice little shield around us. I really like this class a lot for just the fun of playing it. It sounds amazing when you scream and roar. So I hope everybody has a lot of fun with this class. Take note of the Vigilance Vengeance rotation that I'm going to be posting. It's a dot spec and it has some real benefits to dealing with AoE situations. It really shines there, and it doesn't have this leap problem. But of course, as a single target damage, it doesn't quite measure up to where the Rage and Focus class can go. Have fun.